It's amazing how many families I've sat down with over the years that have 10 or 15 401ks out there because they've changed job after job after job.
We had a client whose ex-wife passed away, and they've been divorced for 10 years, and he got $2 million out of her life insurance policy, even though her will said she wanted it all to go to her daughters.
The good thing that we're going to talk about today is how to avoid probate so that we don't have to emotionally and financially get drugged through something that we don't want to go through.
I always say estate planning is not really about you, it's about the people that you love the most, because they will know if you really truly took care of them to make sure that even if you're no longer there, they will be protected.
Today we're going to talk about a mistake that could leave your kids with a nasty legal battle instead of an inheritance, and how a simple piece of paper can protect you from court costs and family disagreements. But this isn't about documents. This is about protecting your family, your wealth, and your peace of mind. Anastasia, welcome to RockTalk.
Thank you.
I'm excited. So we have an in-house brilliant estate attorney today to talk through estate planning and the mistakes that families make and how that can tear at them and, it really cause a lot of drama. I think that's an overlooked area. The first area that we want to jump in today is not having an estate plan at all. I see a lot of families without that. They've put it off for years and years. So, before we get into the actual documents and what that looks like and what families need, let's talk about the human side. Can you walk us through a real life scenario with a family that did not have documents in place and what that looked like for them, not just financially, but emotionally, and how that maybe pulled at the family a little bit?
Absolutely. And we see this so much. And, as a mom myself, it's just so important to me to make sure that never happens to my kids. But an example we had last year was a husband passing away in his 40s, basically had a heart attack, and he was the only breadwinner in the family. They had minor kids at home. The wife stayed home. And without an estate plan, she quickly learned that she had no access to anything. She had no idea. It's not even just about the estate planning documents as a wills and trusts. It's also about the financial piece of does he have enough life insurance? Where is that life insurance? Is it through his employer? Does he have any other source of, money that we could be relying on now that we're grieving and we have lost the breadwinner? So during this whole time, she was unable to locate any of the assets. She was not on a lot of the bank accounts. They had one joint account. Everything else was in his name. And I know a lot of people presume that just because you're married, you will somehow get automatic access to your spouse's accounts if you're not a joint owner. But the law does not presume that. The law says that just because it's your spouse, it doesn't mean that they're automatically next of kin or your decision maker. So you have to go through a legal process that's called probate to get access to your deceased spouse's accounts. And not only do you have to do that, but you also have to even figure out what it is that they owned. And nowadays, because everything is Touch ID, Face ID in your phone, hidden away somewhere, past employers, things like that, a lot of the times your spouse doesn't even know what you have. So the court does not help with any of that. So this poor wife, she had to deal through a lot of financial issues, not just the court issues, but she couldn't afford an attorney because she had no access to any of the funds. And what happens is that everything that was in her husband's name gets completely frozen with no access for her and her kids. So she had to actually go and apply for Medicaid and food stamps while probate was pending because she had no means of survival. So that's a very extreme case of demonstrating how important estate planning really is, especially if you have minor kids or other people that are financially dependent on you. It's just you owe it to them. I always say estate planning is not really about you. It's about the people that you love the most, because they will know if you really, truly took care of them to make sure that even if you're no longer there, they will be protected.
Yeah, that's a tough situation for a family to go through. You just lost your husband and the father of your children, and to have to go through probate, and we'll talk about what that is here in a moment, but to go through all that and to be financially stressed, not have access to all the accounts, and you don't even know which accounts are out there, that's a tough situation for someone. And, if you don't write your own plan, unfortunately the state has one in place for you, right? And you're probably not going to like it. It can be difficult. So, and we hit on probate there just for a moment. What is probate? Walk us through that real quick.
Yeah, so probate is a court process that happens when somebody passes away either without a plan or with the will. A lot of people assume that the will doesn't have to go through probate, but it's not true. Probate's basically a court process where the judge appoints a personal representative or the executor to administer the estate. And while probate's pending, nobody can inherit anything. There's an automatic kind of freeze on all of the assets.
That's right.
While the creditors get notified. So the first people that get notified, even if you died without creditors, you still have to publish something in a newspaper and have it running for 4 months before your loved ones can take anything. So a court process that basically is funded with the money out of the estate by the people that you've left grieving, and they have to go hire attorneys, pay all of the fees, and then experience all of the delays that come with it. So it's a pretty tough process for a grieving family to go through.
But part of the good thing that we're going to talk about today is how to avoid probate.
Yeah.
And there are ways to do that so that we don't have to emotionally and financially get drugged through something that we don't want to go through.
Exactly.
Right? So, and part of that, you touched on a younger family there. And I think oftentimes people think of estate planning is for those that are retired or elderly or later in life, but it's just as important for younger families. And you talked about, missing assets. There are assets that, maybe someone wasn't aware of. And I often see this with those elderly families that, when they do pass away and they leave assets to their kids are left trying to figure out, well, what did mom and dad own? And oftentimes I see, where families had accounts at multiple banks and credit unions, and family members don't know that. And then 6 months in, down the road, they finally get a statement from a bank or someplace, and now they're, oh, okay, well, we've got an account sitting over here. And so it's really difficult to, turn into a detective, right?
Yeah.
Something that we don't do every day to try to uncover these assets. And also, we, have to figure out, okay, did mom and dad also own digital assets, Bitcoin and so forth? Because oftentimes that's not documented. You're not receiving a monthly statement like you do from Fidelity or Schwab, right, on your Bitcoin. So there's a lot to uncover, unfortunately, out there when things are not documented and put in place correctly.
Exactly. And if it doesn't get claimed, it ends up with the state. So like in Colorado, we have $1.2 billion of
and that's with
property.
a B, right? 1.2 billion.
Yeah. And the number one reason how assets get there is that somebody dies and the family just overlooks a life insurance policy or a 401k or an asset. Like, it's obvious to find things like real estate, but then again, bank accounts, credit unions, crypto, digital accounts, all of that is very easy to overlook, and it happens all the time.
It does. I see it, unfortunately, and I know you do too every day. The next area I want to dive into is failing to update your documents, right? And so, I've heard horror stories, outdated wills causing family feuds. What have you encountered on that end?
We've encountered so much that we started offering a complimentary membership to all of our clients, meaning that we review every 3 years, we review their estate plan. The reason being is that I get a lot of clients that come to me and they've done their estate planning in the 80s or in the 90s when their kids were little, and they appointed guardians, and that was it. And then they put it on their shelf, and 30 years went by, and nothing was ever done. But now, again, nobody dies the moment after they sign their estate plan. And again, your assets will change. Your kids will grow up. The people that you named as your executors and trustees will either die or move away or just decide they don't want to do it anymore. So if you don't have that updated, that means that your estate plan's probably going to fail. And the major one being with trusts, and we're going to talk a little bit more about trusts, but having that financial aspect of funding every asset as you're acquiring it into the name of your trust is essential. Because if you don't do that, say you move into a different home and you don't put it into your trust, that house is going to go to probate, which basically defeats the purpose of putting a trust in place in the first place. And so having that financial piece and also making sure that all of your designations in your estate plans are up to date is essential. That's why you always have to stay on top of it, just like you would with financial planning.
There are those life-triggering events, just like you talked about there. So making any changes to any investment accounts, you move, family situations change, and you need to make sure that you've updated the correct executors and trustees and so forth. And so every couple of years, it's great to go back and review that. And so you do it with your clients, something that we also do with our clients. It's a conversation we have each year, going through, figuring out, okay, do we need to update beneficiaries and so forth, and just making sure that everything is in place. And I think that one of the things that both your office and my office both provide for families is a program that where you can take a will or a trust, and it's an AI-based program, and it examines or takes a quick look at the will and the trust, and it gives a family a quick abbreviated summary of everything that you've listed out in that will and trust, like who are the executors, who are the trustees, who are the beneficiaries, who's receiving what. And it's a great place to go back and do a quick reference check just to see, rather than whenever we set up investments for families, I've never had anyone, or very few, we have a couple of engineers that will actually read a prospectus, but most families don't go home and read their prospectus, just like I'm sure most families don't go home and read their will and their trust. They just assume everything is set up correctly, right?
Exactly.
And then they don't go back and review it. And so having that quick reference, that that summary that we provide everyone, that could be a great starting point for a lot of families. Okay, you mentioned a trust. Let's talk about a trust for a moment. Forgetting to fund your trust. I kind of reference this as having a Ferrari in my garage that doesn't have an engine in it, right? It doesn't work. I can't drive it. I can't do anything with it. So I see this mistake a lot. I know you see it every day. So what is forgetting to fund your trust? If someone sets up a trust and they don't fund it, what does that mean?
So basically, a trust works to replace your will, where it'll say the exact same thing as the will, where it will say, who gets what if you die. But the major difference between a will and a trust, and the way the trust lets you avoid probate, is that the trust actually has to become a legal owner of all of the assets that you own.
So it's kind of like an entity or a person in a way.
Right, like your alter ego, like your vault that you create and you fund it with all of your toys. So like you have a toy chest and you put your house in there, you put your bank account in there, you put your 401k by means of beneficiary designation. So depending on the asset type, the funding process is different. So for like real estate, it would be writing a new deed in the name of the trust. For some other accounts, it's retitling them or changing beneficiaries. So that's what we call trust funding, is that process of retitling assets into the name of your trust. And again, a lot of people will ask, okay, does that affect how I can manage my own assets? Is that going to trigger any sort of tax implications? And the answer is no. The retitling is just done to avoid probate. While you're alive, you still control your trust. It's still under your social, no tax implication. But that's where we see a lot of mistakes with working with the transactional attorney that just writes the trust for you and sends you, I call it a CYA letter saying, you need to fund your trust and here's what you need to do. But again, most clients will never read that letter. They'll put it on their shelf. They'll just assume that it's all done, and they will never actually go to the bank or change beneficiaries on the accounts or review their financial picture yearly or every 3 years. And that's where we're different, because we actually do all of the funding for our clients.
I agree. I think that that's refreshing, where I've noticed that with your law firm that you actually help your clients fund the trust, and most just set the trust up. So funding it means that we're going to update the names on the bank accounts, the beneficiaries, whatever that may be. You're going to maybe retitle the home, so that's in the trust and so forth. So you're going to take things further and take the steps that are actually necessary, where now we have the engine inside the Ferrari, so it's actually complete.
Even with crypto, because again, you can't legally title crypto into a trust, but we have steps to share that information with your trustee. We go through your iCloud passwords, your digital assets, all of that with all of our clients. Because again, when I was just starting out in estate planning, and I saw a lot of trusts that were unfunded, and people would still end up in probate because the assets that are not in the trust will go to probate. To me, I thought that was malpractice for that attorney who created the trust. But in real life, it's actually normal practice.
It happens.
A lot of
every
attorneys
day.
do it. They just write the trust. They never look at the financial picture.
It was a transaction.
And it's just a one-time transaction, and the client is left thinking that they have a plan. But when the client passes away, the family quickly realizes that none of the assets are actually in the trust.
You end up with unintended consequences. And then the family ends up, again, just like we talked about a moment ago, now we're in probate. We thought we did everything that was necessary, right, to set up a trust to help our family out, make things easier and avoid probate. But come to find out, oftentimes that isn't done. And it's a big
Exactly.
problem. We've hit on this a little bit, but diving a little bit deeper, overlooking beneficiary designations, right? How can listeners audit their designations, make sure that they don't, have any surprises out there? What are some things that families need to think about on that end?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people don't realize that if you have a will and your will says, I want everything to go to my kids, that will doesn't actually control all of the assets. If you have beneficiaries designated on some assets like 401ks and life insurance are the most commonly used examples. If you have beneficiaries on those and they are not the same people as the will, the people that are listed as beneficiaries will actually get that asset. We had a client whose ex-wife passed away, and they've been divorced for 10 years. And he got $2 million out of her life insurance policy.
Oh, wow.
Even though her will said she wanted it all to go to her daughters. So again, the importance of not just writing a simple will that says, I leave everything to my kids, it's actually reviewing how you hold every asset and who the beneficiaries are. Because again, a lot of people don't realize that you can't name minors as beneficiaries. You can't
I see that all the time.
We see it all the time too.
Daily.
Every day. It's
Yep.
spouse first and then your kids is contingent.
Yep.
But I'm like, if you have minor kids, you can't list them directly.
Right.
But I guess a lot of the insurance people don't tell it to their clients.
Right.
It will end up in probate court. Or, listing somebody as a direct beneficiary and that person is on Medicaid or Social Security. And then they receive an outright inheritance and they lose all of their benefits.
Yep.
And that's a nightmare for them. So again, just having a simple will is not enough. Reviewing your beneficiary designations, reviewing how you own your assets and how they're titled and who are the primary and contingent beneficiaries, that should always be part of your estate planning.
What are maybe one or two or three of the most overlooked assets that people forget to have a beneficiary, to name a beneficiary or list that in their will? What are a couple of the most overlooked?
So nowadays, a lot of it is crypto. So again, some people just assume, it's all like passphrases. There's an 18-word passphrase. It's not even tied to your social.
Good luck figuring that out.
Right.
Right.
So a lot of people just fail to put crypto. There's so much unclaimed crypto or crypto that gets phished upon somebody's death. So that's number one. A lot of people overlook things like annuities. Mm-hmm. And they just have their spouse as the primary beneficiary, and beyond that, there's no contingent. A lot of the other ones are just like you mentioned, naming your minor kids as beneficiaries on life insurance or even 401ks sometimes, mm-hmm. which again will end up in probate and will create with 401ks even a taxable implication. So all of that is constantly, we see this all the time. Or people will sit down and we will ask them, okay, who do you have as your beneficiary on your 401k? And they've had that 401k for 30 years and they have no idea.
Right.
And they just look at you and say, I think it's my wife.
Right.
But I'm
Fingers
not
crossed.
sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Not
Yeah.
realizing the importance of this is your life savings and
Right.
you don't know who it's going to go to.
Right.
If you pass away tomorrow.
Yeah. It's amazing how many families I've sat down with over the years that have 10 or 15 401ks out there mm-hmm. because they've changed job after job after job over the years, and or maybe their company was bought. We have one client, actually a couple clients that have more than 20 401ks
Wow.
that are out there, and for example, one of them he had been a client of ours for a good 5-6 years, and we had moved most of those accounts under our management. We'd rolled them over to IRAs, but then every year or two for quite a while, he would find another 401k. He would get it. He didn't even know how many 401ks he had.
Exactly.
So if something happened to him, there's no way that his spouse, there's no way that his kids are going to know to go find those, mm-hmm. right? So another, piece to all this that, we haven't even talked about is just making a list of all your assets so that someone doesn't have to go and be a detective, right, to try and find everything. So taking that time, that just to list out all the assets, that's a big one.
I agree. That's 90% more than what most people have. I
Right.
always say if you just sit down and fill out our intake form, that asks you, who are your kids? Where do you keep your money? How much do you have in your life insurance? What's your home worth? Just filling out our intake form makes you 90% more organized and prepared than most people out there, because they have no idea. And again, if you don't know where you keep your stuff, then how else would anybody else find out?
Yeah. And one of the biggest things I hear from most families is, I want to do that next year.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that on the calendar for next year. And putting that off, take an hour. Take 30 minutes, just sit down with your spouse over a cup of coffee, sit down one morning and just list all that out as much as you can between the two of you. And, that helps a lot. Do it now versus waiting, because you just never know. And I look at hundreds and hundreds of families that we work with every day, but unfortunately, we've probably had 6 or 7 families, I think it's 7 families this year, where a spouse has passed away. Mm-hmm. And it was all unexpected. They're younger, just right at retirement age. All unexpected. Now, fortunately, we had done a lot of planning with them to make sure that they're in a good financial position and estate planning position, right? But it is a surprise often, is what I've seen. Unfortunately, it's not something that, mom and dad are now in their 90s. We're getting closer to that end of life expectancy potentially. Unfortunately, what we've experienced often is that it's a quick, unexpected situation.
Yeah.
And so taking that time to plan is, I think, it's just vitally important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The next area I want to dive into, ignoring incapacity planning, meaning that if someone gets, sick, hurt, injured, and so forth, and they can't make financial and healthcare decisions on their own. So this is really beyond planning for that end of life piece. This is a crucial area where someone, gets sick, maybe has a stroke, is up skiing in the mountains, bumps their head, whatever that may be. But, most people focus on what happens after I'm gone. But what if you're still here and you can't make decisions? What is that power of attorney piece, the healthcare and financial piece? What does that look like?
That is essential. Again, I am of strong opinion that every adult over the age of 18 needs to have that incapacity.
I 100% agree with you.
Because again, a lot of people don't realize we have a lot of clients whose kids are aging out of 18 and moving away to college, and they don't realize that now you no longer have any decision-making authority over your kids. And again, the law does not presume that you would want your parent or your spouse to make your decisions. So we actually had a few cases where the client's kids moved away to college and got into some sort of an accident, and the parents were not even notified. And in the hospital room, it was some girlfriend and some friends making decisions, not the parents. And again, the parents have to go through the legal process that is done in the probate court that's called guardianship over an adult to retain that control over healthcare and financial decision making. So every adult over the age of 18 should absolutely have it. And that one actually tears families apart. We see it so much. During COVID, that was a big thing where people didn't have any advance directive saying how many days they want to be on life support. Do I want to be put on a ventilator? And so a lot of families ended up in conflict because, your wife could think one thing, but your adult kids could be of a different opinion. Your, mom and dad could think completely something totally different. So again, if there's no consensus, the doctors are just going to send you to court, and whoever wins is the decision maker. But then the rest of your family has to live with that for the rest of their lives, and the sense of guilt or the sense of, resentment towards each other. And again, if you have a spouse and they have a separate bank account that's just in their name, or their 401k or whatever that's just in their name, if your spouse gets into a car accident tomorrow and they can't go to the bank, you won't be able to go for them without a power of attorney because, again, the bank does not presume that just because you're a spouse, you will automatically get access. So a lot of the times people have to go to probate court while their loved ones are still alive to be appointed guardian or conservator over their loved one because they're temporarily or permanently incapacitated. So incapacity should absolutely be part of your estate planning also.
Yeah, so this doesn't just protect the person, it protects the family.
Exactly.
Right? And so there are two pieces to it. There's the financial piece. You need the financial power of attorney there where you've named someone, and ideally we want to name multiple people. We want to name backups, right? Contingents. And so you want to name multiple people to be able to make financial decisions for you. And then you have the durable power of attorney piece for the healthcare where you want to be able to name someone to make healthcare decisions. And again, you want backups. You want to go back, just like we talked about earlier, you want to go back and review these every couple of years, right? Family dynamics change, family situations. You could have family members that you've named that have passed on, right? At some point, oftentimes I see that, when families first get married, and they start having kids, they'll name, oftentimes parents in there, right? But as you get older and your kids get older, you need to maybe change that out to where it's not your parents. Now you want to maybe name siblings or friends, people that you can trust.
Or even
right?
your adult kids at that point.
That's right.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
And it has to be somebody that knows you. I always tell my clients when we deliver their signed powers of attorney to them, we tell them, you need to have these conversations. Nobody wants to have them again, but you have to, because even if that person technically has legal authority to make decisions, they need to know your, specific views and preferences as far as, amputations and life support and surgeries.
Fun topics, right?
Fun topics that, again, you don't want them to just be taking a guess. You want them to know you and have that certainty in their heart that they're doing what you would have done.
Yep.
So again, having these conversations or even writing it out, again, nobody wants to think about it, but it's just essential so that your wishes are honored and no one's fighting and living with the sense of guilt that they're not doing the right thing.
That's exactly right. And, that's a big one, and again, this topic is not something that is exciting often, right? But it's necessary. And again, this is not to protect just you, it's protect the family. And I think, the thing that, I often see that puts stress on a family and can, disrupt a family dynamic is the lack of communication, the lack of trust, and having these conversations up front, having that family conversation. One of the things that we provide for families is, having a family meeting where we can talk about, mom and dad's situation, what their wishes are, how things will play out. And all that can be done without actually exposing or talking about actual numbers. What does mom and dad have saved? We don't have to talk about that mom and dad have $3 or $4 million or whatever it may be in assets. We can just talk about mom and dad's wishes, how they wish the family dynamic to continue on in a great way, between the siblings, because I see it way too often, and I'm sure you do too, if a family gets torn apart because one thinks that they should be in charge, the other, or they don't trust one another, right? And they don't communicate well.
Even though your clients, when they sit down with you, they always say, my kids would never fight over this stuff.
I hear it.
Everybody says that, but 99% of families, they would. And not because they're bad kids, but because it's just human nature.
Right.
We have actually a list of what we call legacy interview questions that I give to my clients, and I tell them, if you're up for it, just sit in front of your camera for 30 minutes and go through this list and do a legacy interview that you then upload to the flash drive that has your estate plan, to where if something happens, your kids can open up that video, and instead of them just reading through a bunch of legal documents, they can actually see your face on camera, talking them through some of the major points of we don't want you guys fighting. This is why we put this in place. This is why we put this restriction in place. So that, again, it's your words to them. Back in the day, you would write a letter. Nowadays, it's easier to just record it. It could be a voice note. It could be a little interview in front of the camera. And then again, because everything is kept digitally, you can just keep that video with your estate plan and share it with them. And I think you can't really put a value on that human piece of planning.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, I think that's a great one. When my wife and I, when we first got married, and the thing we did the first year, we found out we were pregnant not long after we got married, and we thought, okay, we have a baby on the way. Let's get our estate plan in place, because once the baby gets here, we're not going to have time for this. We'll be lucky to get any sleep at all. So let's get this done. We went to a professional. We went to an estate attorney to go get all that done. And so I think when we're looking at the final number 6 here, not shopping around for a good attorney or doing planning online. Online do-it-yourself tools are tempting, they're cheap, but they often fall short. What's your experience on that? Any, rather than using a pro like yourself, what have you seen someone do? Maybe the mistakes or the shortfalls of online planning?
Basically, everything that we've discussed today. It's not really just the documents, because nobody ever reads them. Your overall estate planning portfolio is a binder that's very thick and it's very dense to read everything word for word. So even if AI can spit out a trust for you or whatever online do-it-yourself estate planning software, who is there to guide you, to actually explain to you how it works, how you need to fund your trust, how your assets play into this, how your will does not actually control everything that you have, probate implications, tax implications, keeping it up to date with all of your assets, changing things over into the name of the trust, all of that. No AI, no do-it-yourself plan can ever touch on that, because what they're doing is they're just spitting out template documents. And unfortunately, it's not even AI or do-it-yourself. A lot of estate planning attorneys do the same thing, and I see it all the time.
Agreed.
It's just a template. I've seen clients come to me with the template where the attorney didn't even replace their name. It was literally somebody else's plan, and they were cutting and pasting, and they forgot to replace some of the names. And it was like somebody else's kids listed in there. It's literally going through a template and filling it out. And again, where is the legal guidance in that?
It's a fill in the blank, create your own adventure.
Exactly.
And who knows what you're getting on the back end.
It's like me trying to read, nuclear physics.
Yeah.
And just because I have it printed out doesn't mean that I understand it.
Right.
Who's going to be there to actually tell me how it works in real life? And that's where the value of an ongoing relationship with your estate planning attorney comes into play. Because again, all of my clients, the reason why they pick us is because of that relationship of ongoing guidance. Like, they're not reading their estate plan.
No.
I always joke that like you can start, but you'll probably need a couple glasses of wine and you'll probably fall asleep by the end of it. So that's why
End
you
of page
need
one.
somebody.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you need somebody that's going to hold your hand to tell you this is how it's going to unravel. This is what we need you to do with your 401k. We need to also connect with your financial planner and make sure that your financial piece aligns with your estate plan. No AI is ever going to do any of that for you.
It's not. And where I see a huge gap, and this is where I like to, use you look at our value and where we really separate oftentimes, is that I see that, families, if they really do attempt to get everything in place, they have an estate plan, right? They may have a CPA that helps them with basically doing their tax return. Mm-hmm. There's never any tax planning forward-looking in there. And then they may also have a financial advisor. They may have an insurance person. They may have a banker. But none of those people have ever talked.
Exactly.
Each one of them has their own separate siloed plan for that family. So one of the things that we always work to do is to bring all that together and quarterback that situation to make sure there aren't any gaps, there aren't any problems, and let's overlook everything in there. And, with all this, there's a lot of planning that can be done to bring that together, to put a family, really in the best situation overall. It's overlooked, and it's a tough situation when families haven't taken the time to dive in and make sure that everything's done correctly. As a personal example, my wife and I, we went back and reviewed our estate plan, and in the power of attorney section there, where we're listing out the health care piece, how long, do each of us want to be maybe left on a ventilator or kept alive to see, just how things play out, right? And we had each chose 30 days, but there was a typo on my wife's document that said 3 days. They left the 0 out. Now, I know she wanted 30 days. I had 30 days. And, when she's reading through it and looking at it and we're doing our review, she looked at me and she said, "Why does mine only say 3 days?" And of course, I had to say, well, hey, not me. I didn't change that on
the attorney to just change it on yours.
Yeah, exactly. So I had to do a little backpedaling there and help her out, And so we went right to the estate attorney. Like, look, hey, we got to fix this and update this real quick, right? So even though we used an estate attorney and tried to dot all the I's and cross the T's, we still found mistakes in there, right? Yeah. So, slowing down, getting that, maybe that second set of eyes. So if a family does have an estate plan, right? If they have a will, a trust, what's something that they could do to make sure that everything is taken care of and everything is up to date and they're avoiding the 6 mistakes that we've talked about today?
So hopefully they can go back to the original attorney or get a new one and just have it reviewed. I mean, paying somebody for an hour of their time just to put together a summary of like what software can do now, to have them to give them the reminder of like, this is the people that you've chosen. These are the distributions that you have. And then another piece of it is, again, I think having the financial inventory be included in your estate plan is key. Regardless of whether you have a will or a trust, if it just says everything gets split into these shares, Nobody knows what that everything is. And again, that changes more often than your actual designations in the estate plan. So having that piece, just again, you can just create a spreadsheet by yourself. Just write it all out with numbers, values, how you own it. And then go and work with a professional that can actually put your changes in place and keep you on like an ongoing cadence based on that kind of a relationship where you get to review that every few years before, again, things go so severely out of date that you have to redo the whole thing.
And one last piece, we see a lot of families that move to the state of Colorado. Oftentimes these estate plans don't cross state lines. Can you hit on that just for a moment?
Yeah, so absolutely. When it's a will-based plan, you definitely, because each state has their own probate system, and some are worse than others. Colorado is getting pretty bad now since a lot of people are moving here. There's a lot of delays with probate. But again, if you have a will and it's governed by some other state's law, you need to update that. If you have a trust, trusts actually do travel through state lines, and you want to make sure that you just have all of the new assets that you're acquiring in Colorado properly be funded into that trust. But trusts are meant to avoid probate in any state. But pieces like financial powers of attorney or healthcare directives, that's where laws in every state will be a little bit different and the statutes will have different powers. So it's probably worth updating at least that piece. But again, picking an attorney in the state that you moved to that will be there for you for any ongoing changes, be it the assets that you're acquiring in this new state or any other changes to your powers of attorney and incapacity documents. That's, again, key. So finding somebody locally that you can work with on an ongoing basis to always keep it up to date.
Definitely important. So estate planning, it's not just the paperwork. That's not what it's about. It's about peace of mind.
Exactly.
Right? So if someone wanted to contact you, Anastasia, in your office, how would they go about doing that?
They should probably just go online and go to legacylawgroupcolorado.com, and we have all of our contact information there. They can connect with us through just scheduling a free 15-minute consultation and go from there. Because again, we don't charge for the initial consultation because we want our clients to be educated on exactly what they need and why they need us.
Yeah, great. Hey, if you like today's episode, like, subscribe, share with a friend that needs to hear it. Connecting that estate plan with your financial plan and adding in a tax plan so you have everything together. There aren't any gaps. That's what we do every day. So, if you need that help, reach out to edgerockwealth.com, like and subscribe below. Ask us any questions. Happy to answer. But Anastasia, thanks for coming on today. Thanks for sharing such great information.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.